Mike Snyder is the director of genomics and personalized medicine at Stanford. His laboratory has invented a number of novel systems-wide and genomic technologies. He's widely recognized as the preeminent expert on personalized medicine. Please welcome Mike Snyder. Have fun.
Thank you. Okay, how many of you have been wronged by the healthcare system? More than that, I'm sure. Well, first of all, I think the system's broken. We don't really practice healthcare, we practice sick care. Not only that, when we do practice healthcare, if you think about the way we do it, it's very antiquated. Basically, the way this works is you'll typically get in a car, always at a very inconvenient time to travel to a physician's office. When you're there, you'll arrive at a doctor's office. It looks pretty much the way it's looked for the last 40 years. While you're there, they'll stick a needle in you and pull a lot of blood. And from all that blood and the time you're there, they actually don't make very many measurements. And then from those measurements, they'll treat you based on population averages. We think every one of these steps can be improved. And so with regards to this last one about population averages, you've probably been told since you're little, your temperature when you put a thermometer in your mouth is 98.6. Well, it turns out if you look at the data that are out there, it's more like 97.5. This is just one study. A very recent study from Stanford had 300,000 people, and the number came out 97.7, not 98.6. But the more important point on this slide is the bottom of that box is the 25th quartile. So that means there's a spread, and basically 25% of people are in the 94.6, and the 75th quartile is 99.1. So that means in today's world, if your normal healthy baseline is 94.6 and they measure you at 98.6, they'll tell you you're normal, you're healthy, everything's fine, go home. But I guarantee if you're up 4 degrees over your baseline, you're not healthy. And that's a big part of what we think should change. We think everyone should know their personal healthy baseline and then detect shifts from that, and that's the focus of our research. Now, I think you all know your health is influenced by many things. Your DNA is certainly an important one at the top here, but that accounts for about 16% of your lifespan. All these other factors, your lifestyle and environmental exposures, we know intuitively impact your health, but we're in a world where we can actually measure many of these, some of them well, some of them a bit clunky, but even if we don't measure them directly, we can actually measure their effects by doing deep biochemical and physiological profiles on people, and that's one of the things our lab does. And this is because there's been a revolution in technologies. You can now sequence someone's DNA for $100. Now, it costs more than that to actually interpret that, but nonetheless, the point is it's getting rather cheap. On top of that, we can make thousands of measurements out of your blood through mass spectrometry, these things they have in airports. And there's a wearable revolution, we'll talk about that in a minute, where you can do continuous monitoring of people as well. All these together let us pull data in on people with incredible ease. And so a number of years ago, we set up a project to see if we could use advanced technologies to better manage people's health. We call it the personal omics profiling, where actually it's a rather small group of people. We started with 109, it's up to about 170 now, but we'll sequence their DNA once to make predictions about their genetic risk, and then we'll make as many measurements as possible out of their blood and urine. We even measure something called the microbiome, that's your poop, where it has lots of bacteria that are important for your health. And we'll measure all these things on top of deep clinical tests, questionnaires. We also do a lot with wearables, I'll talk about that in a minute, as well as advanced tests like stress echocardiograms and glucose control measurements. And we're measuring these on healthy people. We're trying to understand what a healthy profile looks like, not a sick profile, and how that changes over time. And importantly for this discussion, we're trying to see if we can use these advanced technologies to better manage people's health. I can tell you when we started this, people did not like the idea of sequencing genomes of healthy people. Physicians thought we'd turn everybody into hypochondriacs. It would cost millions of dollars. Now they're warming up to the idea, and it has turned out to be powerful. And so we are doing these very, very deep measurements on people, and we're also doing it longitudinally. We'll sample them every 3 months while they're healthy with additional samplings when they're ill. And again, the idea is to see if we can track their health and use these technologies to better manage their health. And just from the first 3.5 years, from the first 109 people we studied, 49 had a major health discovery, and these spanned many, many different areas. They spanned hemoncology, cardiovascular disease, metabolic health, so on and so forth. And some of these turned out to be a big deal. I should say these are all found pre-symptomatically, no symptoms yet. One person, if you look under hemoncology, had early lymphoma. 2 people had pre-cancers listed just under that can convert to aggressive cancers. 2 people had serious cardiovascular issues. Several of them were quite young. And so basically we uncovered these again pre-symptomatically, and no one technology found it. Sometimes it was the genome sequencing, sometimes it was the imaging, often it was the biochemical measurements, and usually it was a combination of several different measurements that we were making. And so the way we like to think about this, if your health is a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, we're trying to take 500 or 600 pieces versus say 5 or 6, which is currently done the way medicine is practiced now. We're getting a much clearer picture. The other thing we could do is that as we're tracking people over time, we can see how they age. And it turns out everyone ages differently. Person number 2 there in the middle, their top biochemical pathway that changed is their hypertrophic cardiac signaling pathway. So they're actually a cardioager, if you will. We later learned they're stage 2 hypertensive. And the person on the left, they're an immune ager. They also have their metabolic pathways changing and so forth. And so we can actually classify people into ageotypes, their aging patterns. And it turns out there are clinical markers associated with each of these ageotypes. And some people have actually even reversed those markers. I'm not saying they got younger, but they did in fact improve their health markers, if you will. Now, one question I get a lot is, well, that's a research study. How are you going to scale that up? It costs millions of dollars. And the answer is, I'm in Silicon Valley, so you form a company. And so the company we formed is called QBio. They actually do a medical version. They don't do all the assays I told you before. They do many of them, but not all of them. And they also do whole body MRI. If you ask any physician today, should you do whole body MRI, they'll tell you absolutely not. And do you know why? Incidental findings, nodules. Everybody has them. Women have them in their ovaries, men in their prostate, 100% of the time. And if you ask Mike Snyder, should you do a whole body MRI? I say absolutely. What's the difference? You should be doing them longitudinally. It's not do you have nodules, it's do you have any growing nodules. I have 9 nodules, I know exactly where they are. I'm happy to say none are growing, but I'll know if they ever take off, I'll be able to spot that. So we actually think these longitudinal profiles are super important. And so this company, you can see up here from the first 100 plus people, found some pretty important things. Caught someone starting from the bottom with early ovarian cancer. Next one up, prostate cancer. Even caught someone with early pancreatic cancer, which is almost never found early. And I should point out, these are all found pre-symptomatically. Once again, catching these things before people had illnesses, we can treat them much more effectively. So the other thing that we've been doing a lot is this idea of trying to monitor people at home. Why do you go to a physician's office when you're healthy to get measured? Well, I think some of that is useful, but much of it can be done at home. And so we've been so-called Amazonizing healthcare. And we're using 2 different approaches for this. One is wearables. How many of you are wearing a smartwatch or ring? Oh, excellent audience. Tons. Love it. All right. These things are powerful, as you know, because they measure you continuous, 24/7. And they measure some pretty important things: resting heart rate variability, blood oxygen. That may not be accurate, but the changes are actually pretty good. You can pick those up pretty easily. And so the other thing I'll tell you about in a minute is home microsampling. So these wearables, again, they're powerful because they're following you 24/7. I myself use 8 of these devices typically. You can see all my watches here. My ring is a sensor. Even my hearing aid, believe it or not, I use it for hearing, but it's also a sensor as well. It's measuring my interaction scores, which is pretty important for your health, and it measures physiology as well. So these things are collecting data, again, passively. As long as you keep them charged, you'll collect valuable data. So one of the things we discovered early on is you can tell when people are getting ill from a simple smartwatch and a pulse ox. It's how I figured out when I first got Lyme disease, because basically my blood oxygen dropped, my heart rate jumped up, resting heart rate. I later saw my skin temperature was elevated, all pre-symptomatically, and then we went on to figure out it was Lyme. Sort of suspected it because of the timing. It was uncovered 2 weeks after I was in a Lyme-infested area. We then went on actually to show that I could tell every time I got a respiratory viral infection, retrospectively, we had 2 years of data, and could see every time I got ill, you could see a jump up in resting heart rate in advance of symptoms. And we wrote algorithms that worked on me, they worked on other members of our cohort. Every single time, could tell you're getting ill from a jump up in resting heart rate. So we published this in 2017. Of course, along came COVID in early 2020. And right away, we wanted to see if we could detect COVID with a smartwatch. So we partnered with Fitbit. I got 5,300 people enrolled, and 32 of them were actually wearing their smartwatch when they got COVID. So we wanted to see if we could pick it up. And that top line there, that's a graph of someone's resting heart rate. It's our very first case. That individual, if you look at day 48, the purple day there, that's when they were diagnosed with COVID. The red day was when their symptoms first appeared, but if you look upstream of that, you'll notice 9.5 days prior to their symptoms appearing, their resting heart rate jumped up. You can't miss that signal. It's very, very obvious. Okay, and in the end, we had 32 people. We could pick up COVID in 80% of them, and the median was 4 days prior to symptom onset. Works very well for COVID, because COVID has a long pre-symptomatic period. And so we went on to write a real-time detection system where we follow your resting heart rate in circadian fashion and then look for a jump up in signal for too high, too long, and it'll set off a red alert. It's a cloud-based system that can follow millions of people. I would like to actually monitor the entire planet. Half the planet has a smartphone. You could actually follow people's health for half the planet and follow spread. So the bottom line is this is our real-time alerting system. If you have the signal too high for too long, you get a red alert. And this is one of our first cases, day 21. This person had their symptoms appear. Day 22, they were diagnosed. But basically, you can see they were getting red alerts for 3 days prior to symptom onset. It works on Apple, it works on Fitbit, it even works in asymptomatic cases. We can tell when people are getting ill without them knowing it because they get this jump up in heart rate. As little as 2 beats per minute, we pick it up. And if you think about how we measure health now with temperature, it's actually a 300-year-old concept, and it doesn't work very well. For COVID, half the people don't get a fever, whereas resting heart rate's a very, very sensitive measure and actually works pretty well. Now, I want to emphasize this is not specific for COVID. There are other things that can trigger these red alerts, and it turns out the number one trigger of red alerts is workplace stress. Okay, so that can trigger things. It's actually a stress detector. And we're writing algorithms and writing studies to see if we can tell mental health issues from a simple smartwatch. And we do have signals coming from that watch. Actually, it turns out your watch measures many, many things and can pick up certain clinical measures like red blood cell counts and such as well. We figured this out using machine learning and such. And it measures other things as well. Many of these you can contextualize, including other infections. So it's a general stressor, and I know with more data, we can tell the difference between a mental health stress and a respiratory viral infection. We already know we can tell the difference between Lyme and respiratory viral infections. The other devices out there that are quite powerful these days are glucose monitors. Are any of you wearing or have worn one of these? Boy, these are one of the most powerful and eye-opening devices you'll ever measure. They measure your glucose every 5 minutes, and given that 9% of US is diabetic and 33% are pre-diabetic, and 90% of those pre-diabetics don't know it, we think this is a big deal because most pre-diabetics will become diabetic. And if you wear these devices, what you'll discover, our claim to fame is we put them on normal people and pre-diabetics. We discovered that a lot of people do have good glucose control. That's that top line up there. The middle one is someone who has moderate glucose spiking. And the one at the bottom was thought to be they thought they were normal, but they were spiking just as bad as diabetics. We went on to write algorithms to classify people into the spiking patterns called glucotypes. And it turns out different people spike to different foods. Some people spike to potatoes, others to pasta, some to white bread, some to brown bread. It's all over the map. And so Aaron Siegel, this is some work from him, we discovered this as well. The top person up there, participant 445, that person's spiking to a banana but not a cookie. Probably the only person on the planet doesn't spike to a cookie. The one on the bottom spikes a cookie and not a banana. That's much more normal. And so we found that actually, some people spike to bread and peanut butter, probably thanks to the bread. Protein bars have carbs. Some people spike to those. 80% of people spike to cornflakes and milk. That stuff is super evil. If you don't remember anything from my talk, remember that. Watch out for that. That is not healthy for most people. The other thing we've worked very hard on is this idea of remote sampling. Why go to a physician when you're healthy when you can make a lot of these measurements or give samples at home? And so we spent about 7 years on this. The idea is you take little pricks of blood, you mail them into us, FedEx them in, and their lab will then quantify about 2,200 molecules in people's blood. Now, I know what this sounds like, but ours actually works. Okay? So basically, we'll do deep metabolomics, proteomics, lipids. These are measuring all your proteins, your metabolites, your lipids, and some very, very targeted assays on pretty key molecules are shown at the bottom. And so we spent a lot of time, as I say, developing this technology, and then we went on to run some really fun studies. We had 32 people drink this shake that you can buy in CVS. And then we profiled them before, 30 minutes, 60, 120, 240 minutes afterwards. And what we discovered is that everybody reacts to the shake differently. So each box up there is a different person. I don't know if I can point this out, probably not. The one that's about a third over, it's called S13. That individual, I'm showing the carbohydrates here. That individual's carbohydrates plummets when they drink the shake. But you just go over 3 more boxes and you'll see someone whose carbohydrates skyrocket. You look through there, you'll see some people go up, other people go down. It's all over the map. One of the fun results is shown at the bottom. We've summarized how people react, and people classify into 5 types of people. The gray is the average, and you'll probably have a hard time seeing this, but the brown spot sort of at about 1030 there. In group 5, those are your inflammatory markers. For group 5 people, their inflammatory markers goes down when they drink the shake. Go over to group 4, their inflammatory markers goes up. Same with group 1. So for some people, the shake is pro-inflammatory, and others it's anti-inflammatory. So it's very personal. Okay, when you think about 10% of people having inflammatory bowel syndrome, probably a lot of you have had something at some point in there. We can actually measure that with this kind of an assay. Here is, in fact, now our ultimate experiment. We took one person, we analyzed them every hour for 7 straight days, every waking hour, where they gave samples. And they're wearing one of these continuous glucose monitors and a smartwatch and logging their food and everything else. And then we went on to see, basically, if we could correlate their behavior, the foods they ate, with their physiology and biochemistry. And what we discovered is there's thousands of correlations between people's what's shown on there is heart rate, steps, and glucose. And we can make correlations with their inflammatory markers, basically their metabolites, their lipids, and we find all kinds of cool things, some of which are known already. We saw in this person, their glucose went up their insulin went up 10 minutes after their glucose. That would be expected, but we can measure it. The other thing that was kind of interesting, we discovered a brand new inflammatory marker that went up in response to glucose as well. And then one of the things that's cool here that fits off of Fanny's talk, see that alpha-synuclein graph in the middle? That's a marker that's been implicated in dementia and Parkinson's. It shows a very interesting pattern. We think it's going up in response to certain stresses, and we can measure that. So the idea here is that if we can quantify this, we could actually be able to measure individual responses to things like this dementia marker, and maybe people would modify their behavior and possibly push off getting dementia down the road. So the idea is with markers, as you heard earlier, we could better manage people's conditions, the stresses they might do, with the idea of trying to push off disease. So the way we're pulling all this data in, we built a dashboard, not unlike your car dashboard, that pulls in all your data, your wearable data, your clinical data, your omics data, all this different data that's out there, and displays it on your phone. We think your iPhone's going to be your most important health instrument, and of course you can talk to it and it can talk back to you, so you'd be able to interact with it, and especially using AI, be better able to manage your health because you'll have more time to spend on your iPhone than you do with your physician. So the other thing we've done, as I mentioned, is that we are trying to get these technologies out there. So I founded a number of companies over the years. This is just a few of them. And the idea here is, again, to get these technologies out there. And I'll just show you one example. This is YOLO, which actually does a 500 metabolite test, meaning you give a drop of blood, in this case from your shoulder, mail it in, and they give you back a report on about 600 metabolites that fall into 20 wellness categories. And they cover things that are pretty important. Whoops, oxidative stress, so I can go back. Inflammation, bone health, heart health, all these different things. And they can even give you an aging report, your profile based on that of others, and we can track this longitudinally. And with regard to the aging report, this is a very, maybe a typical one. This is an individual whose biological age is older than their chronological age. So biologically, they're older than they should be. Okay, but the nice thing is you can break this down into the agent types I mentioned earlier. So their inflammation markers are pretty good. Their metabolic age markers aren't so bad either, but their heart age is older than it should be. And by using AI, we can pull in information about their profiles and other information that's out there and make recommendations about what they might do to improve their wellness profiles. And 95% of people who do this actually improve their profiles for the next visit. So where is all this going? Well, this is Mike Snyder's world. I envision a world where people get sequenced before they're born. And then together with biochemical and wearable measurements, we can better track their health, predict risk, catch disease early, and better manage and treat disease using data-driven approaches. And we can build personalized AI tracking systems around people. I, of course, have one around me because I like to track all these things myself. But that'll be, we think, effective in catching disease early and better managing and treat disease. So that's my vision of the future, and I hope you can imagine that. Thanks.
Step on up. I want you to hold your hands up. I can't help but notice that you seem to have some devices. What are you measuring? Do you mind me asking?
Sure. Do you want them all, the whole list?
Yeah, well, lots of them. Yeah, give me some.
So resting heart rate variability, something called galvanic stress response, which they don't measure now. That's conductance on your skin. Believe it or not, when you're diabetic, your skin gets drier. So you can pick this up, and we can predict people's glucose levels from a simple smartwatch. What else? It measures skin temperature, which is pretty accurate. Sleep, of course, which is a big deal. This is my exposometer, measures airborne exposures. You don't know what you're breathing right now. I don't know either.
Do you know what I'm breathing right now?
I will when I get back to Palo Alto.
Oh, okay. All right. That's not a lot of help for me right here.
It could be later.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's all kinds of different things.
That's interesting. Fascinating. Good.
So,
Mike, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you so much.